Hi, this video is going to serve two purposes. My template map is out of date. There are new functions that we've made since we put this together, and this will allow me to update that while giving an overview of the project from a more technical standpoint than some of our videos. So originally this was to have a little bit of every type of thing that you can use to build levels, and everything that you see in the directories that is blue is meant for level builders. This may not be the same as it will be on some of the branches in the repository, because those settings I think are getting overwritten based on how we're doing merges. But you can reference that at least in this video, and then going forward it should be available as you're working. So our base structure is pretty typical. There's a little bit that is unique to the project, and a little bit that's outdated from migrating this from our other project this was a mini game inside of. So anything blue, again, for level builders. All the blueprints will be anything that has the logic in it. It's not just like this here, which is just a mesh. So there's nothing behind it. It's just a static mesh. Whereas this is our kill block, the same as the one on the floor that makes up the floor. And I'll Control E to go to its logic to show how that's working. And basically, when you hit this static mesh, if it's the ball, it'll run through the destroy process. So I won't go through each one of those how they work, but each of these tools under the blueprints folder is designed so that level builders don't have to see that back end and understand how it works. For more technical people, it'll give you the opportunity to have a kind of a guide to build new content that has these sorts of tools and understand why they are there the way they are as you're working with what's already here. So I was going from each island to the next using a tool, whether it is this moving platform, you can see has a beginning and an end marker, or the jump pad, which has a similar marker for where it's going to end up, or the switches that can be attached to any object that implement that interface, switchable, or something along that line, and they'll either be activated or deactivated. So like this platform won't move until you step on the switch. So as I go about this, I can tell I'm not going to be able to talk about it and build out this level in real time. So I'll just stick to the objective of introducing stuff. Under content, blueprints, and mobility, I have the moving platform and the launch pad. These directories can be mixed up, changed as we go along and find that they don't quite make sense. This is just kind of a starting point. So here I've got a couple obstacles, and they range from that kill volume there, which is just going to be changed by grabbing the static mesh, and I may set up an easier option than this later, but you can just swap out this mesh for whatever you want to have, destroy them, because it's based on hitting the mesh, not on what kind it is. So this could be a cone or any other piece that we have, as long as it's got this blueprint, then that'll kill the player. And we have two other types of obstacles, like a falling brick, kind of like Mario 3, and then a spawner that'll spawn boulders that'll roll down or move at whatever velocity you set. So I don't have, here is one of the pillars. You can place it and set its starting point and its ending point. And any blueprint that's got options to change will have it under OGS Customize here in the Details panel. And for this one, for example, there's that active that can be affected by the switch, and it looks like indeed this one is off and waiting for something else. Waits for player would say that this isn't just moving up and down constantly like a piston. It's going to wait until the player goes under that collision box to say, okay, I'm going to smash him. And then raises automatically is kind of changing this thing from a straight obstacle to more of a puzzle idea, where when it falls, it stays down and you can't get through anymore until you get it activated again, something like that. So these features sometimes are partially implemented. Anything that's exposed publicly like this, so anything, if we go into a blueprint that has the, oh, this is probably under the base. Okay, so those are all part of the base class here, and anything that's exposed publicly should be functional. But I'm sure there's exceptions, something maybe I didn't notice. This pillar scale, I left pretty open so that you can have it look however you want. And again, you could change the mesh if you wanted, although it might be a little funky depending on what you pick, but you definitely could put in a cone or cylinder, whatever new assets maybe that we made for it. And as you move it around, the billboard here is what you want to grab onto to change. So I can select it like this. So the billboard here is where you want to grab onto to show how far it's going to go to its endpoint. And that's the same way these work. Anytime you see one of these billboards, it's basically the handle for what you grab to tell it where to go. And the other obstacle is this spawning volume, which is itself just this cube, and then it spawns the type of ball that you select. So if we hover over the cube here, we can say whether or not it's looping, basically if it's constantly launching these things, or if you have it just go once. And then the spawn rate won't obviously do anything if it's not looping, but it's how quickly it's spawning the balls. And I think I have it clamped to where it can only, let's see if I can get up. They don't have it clamped. I think there's a clamp in there that'll keep it from spawning a ton of stuff and breaking it. And then the class to spawn, you could obviously pick anything, but it doesn't make any sense. We have this rolling obstacle boulder and push. The boulder, I think, kills on impact, just like this floor kill, and then the push will just add an impulse to the ball. I think it might be automatic because of the physics. So here we have this item that has this arrow here. Grab the billboard. So what we're doing with this is saying in what direction it's grabbing a vector for this thing to spawn them in. If I don't give it an impulse, let's see, this launch force, if I don't give it an impulse, it's just going to fall. But if I add an impulse, I can set that direction of that vector wherever I want in whatever direction I want. And instead of just dropping these things, it'll launch them in whatever direction you specify. So that is the spawning volume. These are what they spawn. And you can jump into each one of them to see how it is working. They should all be pretty similar in their layout across these types of things. The last obstacle is not always an obstacle. It is sometimes used as like a boost as well. I don't think we have just a plain boost. This is a wind volume, and so we have this placeholder effect for it, but we'd like to get some like wind line particle sprites or something. So this one, if I place it in the world, is going to have a default length and lifetime and width. I don't have handles on this one, but you can scale it up to whichever dimensions you want, and it will affect that range. But let's see. I think it affects that range automatically. I haven't used this one since I made it. Let's see what it does. I think by default it should blow enough to move me around. Maybe raise that intensity. So the wind power, so I'm going to turn up here so that it will push the ball farther in. And it's like 1 to 10. I guess that clamp doesn't affect. Maybe I didn't set the slider clamp, but the effect will be clamped. And 10 is a lot because it's raised to a scale. So I just have it simple numbers by multiplying by that scale. So you can see the wind power. Here's that wind scale, which is not able to be affected. It's the impulse that it adds to the player. So let's jump in again and see what that does. Yeah, it's a lot stronger, I think. And it looks like blowing all throughout that range. The visual doesn't change. And I'd like to hook this up, but I didn't have that as a super high priority item. So this wind width, I think, default. Oh, I lowered it. Wind width, you just have to kind of play around with, since I don't have it wired up together to be logical. But that shows the visual change here, and the same with the height. And the particles, I don't have updated automatically either, so you would just kind of take that factor and multiply by the same factor. So here we have 500, which might be a little too much, but you can kind of play around with it. And just, I think this is also clamped to not let people make it go too crazy. But you see the pattern here. Like, you might need to go through some of these to be familiar with them. But the idea is someone can just drag one of these wind volumes in, and I've made a video for each tool that we made, and within like a 7-minute video, you can get the gist of how to put something in there, and then from there, just kind of play around with it until you get what you like. And both for them and for someone with more technical ability, any kind of change that you don't see, or any kind of feature you don't see, or effect that's not working, you can add to our Trello here. Let's see if I'm logged in. You can add to our project management tool, and if you're not added onto it yet, I don't think it will let you, and you can find that out and notify me, and I'll add you as a member. But it would either go into, I think it would be best to put it into the backlog. Right now I have in our to-do just everything that we have focused on for the release, which is June 1st, and then from there we'll reevaluate our immediate goals with the project. But to-do doing done is emulating either Scrum or Kanban. It's a little loose right now because we just have a few members and not enough experience and activity to really follow a strict timeline. Again, after we release, that's going to be one of the shifts, is we'll try to focus more on that. But that said, if you or someone else isn't comfortable adding this on top of the other things to learn with the project, they can ignore this or only reference it in as much as it's comfortable. Like, I don't know what to build today. I'll look for any of the darker green here, which are the programmer label, and I'll do that one. Or if I'm doing level design or level building, that's our dark bluer one. That's the builder. So these things will indicate what type of task it is. And as a member, you're welcome to make whatever tasks you want and assign those labels. If you haven't used Trello before, there's really good quick videos because they are part of Atlassian, and it's a big company. It's super intuitive to use once you have a little bit of time with it. And if you don't have any Scrum experience, any Agile development, that can be another part that gets tricky because it's not just create a card, put it in the right one, although that's as simple as it is when you just drag and drop stuff around. There's more to it than that. But it's something voluntary that I'd be happy to go with one-on-one, because even if you looked it up some more, we probably won't be doing it just like you see in their videos. So that kind of covers the general idea of these blueprints. I'll take another look at the other ones to see if there's something that really stands out to me. Again, the base and then the child blueprints that extend the functionality. That green one is worth less than the blue one. So this setup folder is a little different because these are intended to be items that are required for each map. So we have start, we have finish, we have checkpoints, which is disconnected right now because I switched from one single strain of levels, and it would just increment between them. The checkpoint would save it and load it, but I switched it to worlds, and so I need to make either a 2D array or like a hash map or something to go from, to track it better than having 0 through 10 or whatever, and also make it easier for people to add levels and not have to manually hook up where it goes in that array. Anyway, the checkpoint is disconnected, but you have the level transition, which is like your finish point. It's all kind of crammed in here because this was originally less items and one island, but the level transition is this floating thing that whenever you walk under it, you'll teleport out. The start is, or the map setup has this start thing, which is a little misleading, but it was the best icon I could find. And you basically set up how the level is going to go with the OGS customized settings, whether or not it's going to be won by picking up coins or by reaching the end point or both, and what level is going to be loaded from here. And it goes in every map, but it doesn't have to be set up by the non-technical people. So like if they build a map and they make something that looks cool, but maybe doesn't hook up into the main story, that's fine. And it just needs to be passed along as a task in the Trello, like, I created whatever level 7, and then it needs to be hooked into the world. It's ready for test. So that communication there or in the Discord is how we pass that around. And I've got some uncategorized blueprints here that just didn't fit with any of the directories, and that's kind of why I also say that this will probably change, and you're welcome to suggest changes and stuff too. So these are part of the attribution map and the materials change map. So this guy here is only colliding on a query, so it'll let the ball overlap it. You don't roll on top of it. And I guess by default I need to have it flat because that's how it's sitting in the material switching map. When you roll over it, it gives the player whatever material is set to that, again using the OGS customize options here. So if I go down to that, for some reason, okay, I didn't categorize it yet for this one, but it'll be moved from this materials to, or this default to that. So whatever I put on there with advanced flag or whatever, when they roll over it, the ball will be set with that, and that'll be saved from play to play. So that's all the logic here. The rest of it should be pretty straightforward if you've ever gone into a project before of any complexity. The maps, the production maps, are not to be changed unless it's your map, and even then, with caution, unless you know what's going on. And then outside of that, this is the template map that we're in. And for a new member, especially someone who is not quite comfortable with everything, just right-click, duplicate, and you can get going with a copy of this. And not worry about messing up anyone else's maps. These other folders here are for the asset packs that I have brought into it. This is a material pack, for example, that we have, and other ones are asset packs that are laid out in either a demonstration or a showcase that has all the objects. So this is basically all of the assets that we have available to swap out the ball with, or all the ones that are intended for it. You can put any material you want, of course. So the last thing here in the builders is the meshes, and within it, it's only certain ones, and that's the 2 prototype packs. So we don't have very many at all original assets going into the project yet, and honestly, a lot of the aesthetic that we get from these prototyping assets, I'm happy with. If we are not looking to go for a different aesthetic, like this one is just a basic landscape with one of the prototyping materials enlarged to fit the squares on a larger space. All these blocks you can see are parts of those packs too, both the shapes and the materials. So the idea is to replace all of that and not necessarily stick with any particular look like this. If you go from level to level, most of them will be just basic shapes with concepts built in. And then, and again, I put these together as I'm going because I'm not specifically interested in building levels. I'm more interested in building these tools and systems. One of the concepts is to bring in a nice 3D model and build a course around it that lets you see the different aspects of it as you go. Just a totally random thought. So it's really open to the builder, the developer, how they see it going. And if there's an aesthetic like this that we repeat 5, 10, 15 times, it can go into the hub, which is how we go from world to world. And again, everything needs a major art pass. This is just a concept of moving from one person's levels to another. And if, let's say, we have 8 or 12 people instead of just a couple of us, then we would just have another instance of it, whether it's off to the side or whether it's above it and we use the moving platform as an elevator, just however we want. This was a concept for showcasing an unlimited number of members' contributions from a main standpoint. And what we can do to further distinguish things is to have kind of featured levels that are more advanced. People who are making them are more familiar with the systems, and then have kind of just the floor of this would just be anybody who makes a level and wants to be a part of it, but maybe isn't as experienced. If we start to get some levels in here, all of mine are going to fall into that category. They're not high quality things; they're just demonstrating concepts. But yeah, that's how the maps are working here. And a couple of these are this unsorted, is where I'm catching stuff that has references still that is not desirable. Same with this GT Free, which was that materials pack. So some of this will change around, but the basic categories that you see in any starter project will be there. So I think that pretty much covers what we've got going inside. I didn't go through these maps because you saw most of them are pretty simple. The hub I showed, which was how it moves from one level to the next, using that portal, which was this sparkly thing I pointed out earlier. And you just set what level it's going to go to. If it's blank, it takes that starting point, and if this is not blank, it overrides the starting point. The idea behind that is, let's say this map had a hard to reach place, and I wanted to reward them for getting there. I can duplicate this and say, if you get to this one, you get to go to the bonus level or something. So I wanted to give the flexibility to have a default way to transfer to the next level, maybe have like a hidden room or special level, or just if it's got like a bunch of windy paths, have several exits to the same level. So that was the hub, and then the idea of moving around. The material switch level I briefly mentioned, how it's got these, those are the items with material set on them, and as you roll the ball around it, it grabs that material, and I don't think I've got anything. Okay, so it just jumps to the first level since I didn't move around. That's the checkpoint. It's basically disabled right now, and here is a portal back to that material switcher, which is another setup tool meant to be put in every level so that the players can go grab a new material when they want, rather than putting it in a menu that you just access through buttons and have like a reticle moving up and down targeter. Let's see, main menu map is deprecated. We're not using it anymore. There's just a blank one that loads this widget, but now we're starting on the hub, so it's a more dynamic experience. When the game loads up, it goes to this. I'd like a little cinematic between levels and at the beginning of the game, but we don't have anything in place yet there. Attribution is the last non-standard map that I've got, and it's a real mess right now. It's real busy with the different types of things, but you basically have a similar concept to the levels. These are camera switching tools that'll rotate you to the direction you want to face, and each type of asset that members can contribute can be attributed with a different object here. So there's a base attribution object, and then all the child classes of that. I need to make this sound quieter. All the child classes that will have different types of things that they display. So yeah, the same way that material one would finger out from the base one, this base tells you this type of thing is in that direction, and then if we had 100 members, it would be just pad after pad after pad, something like that. You could tell maybe that camera switcher can be a little awkward at times. You would basically, in that level with the urn here, you would basically put them whenever you are rotating around something, because the camera is fixed. The player can't choose which way to turn. But this thing has that little vector arrow, so you rotate this whole guy here, and it will lurk between the camera positions from the start to the finish. Whatever you're starting at, after like a second and a half, it will be moving this way. And that is so that we can restrict their camera. Instead of allowing them free movement, we can restrict it to the direction that we want them to go. And there's pros and cons to each of those styles, and we could maybe switch it up to where the designer could choose whether this is a free look level or a fixed camera level. That pretty much covers all of the different aspects of the project within the code. I briefly touched on the Trello. There are other endpoints for working. The GitHub and the Discord are the main activity points. There is also our Google Drive, which is probably I'm going to switch to a Dropbox instead. But that's our repository for larger assets and for people who are more casual who don't want to go through the version control. So if I just made like this checkpoint, if this was someone who wasn't comfortable with using Git and GitHub, they could just upload it to our shared Dropbox. So that is about it. Please let me know what kind of thoughts you have from me going through this, and whether there's something you'd like to see specifically more information on. And if not, then we can just look at things as they pop up and become of interest. Thanks.